Well, welcome McLean Church to this edition of McLean Church Online. We're recording this for the week of July 24th, 2023. We are in the lazy, hazy days of summer. And boy, if you especially live in northwestern Pennsylvania, surely hope that you're taking advantage of some of the wonderful summer opportunities we have in this area, in this region, are enjoying time to yourself, time with family, time with friends. It's really a wonderful time of the year here in northwestern Pennsylvania. And being summer, today we want to talk about a pretty common summer event. We want to talk a bit about weddings. And we're doing this as part of a new series we're launching this week entitled 4 Traditions You Can't or Shouldn't Live Without. 4 traditions you can't or shouldn't live without. And this goes back to earlier in the summer when we did a series entitled 4 Things You Can't Live Without. And one of those things we talked about was the importance of traditions in helping us as people navigate change. And behind this current series and the series we did earlier in the summer is this idea or this notion that for most of us, we're in an unprecedented moment of cultural change. Most of us haven't experienced the speed or the degree to which the world is changing around us. And a lot of the change that's occurring, it is very good and very needed, very necessary, very helpful. A lot of the change we're experiencing is good. But in the midst of so much change, and change that's happening so quickly, I think there's a tendency to too quickly jettison some things that we would do better to hold on to. That there's a tendency in this moment of great change and speed of change to not just get rid of things that should be gotten rid of, but to also abandon some things that maybe we ought to hold on to. And I think some of our traditions fit that category. We're quick to dismiss so many of our traditions from the past as old-fashioned, outdated, irrelevant, and some of them are. But I think we're too quickly getting rid of some traditions that really we can't or shouldn't live without. And one of those traditions is the tradition of wedding ceremonies, the traditional wedding ceremony. And I want to spend a few moments today talking about the significance and the importance of the traditions that surround and embody that ceremony. I have my parents' wedding album. They got married in August of 1956, and they got married right here at McLean Church, not our current Edinburgh facility, the facility that we occupied at the corner of Oliver Road and Route 99 before moving to this facility in Edinburgh in 2003. My parents' wedding, it happened in the church that they grew up in, the church that they worshiped in every week. It was performed by the pastor of the church at the time. The reception to the wedding was in the church basement, and my mom laments that they had plans to have the reception out in the yard. Her parents actually lived right next to the church, and they were going to do an outside reception in their backyard, but when the wedding ended, the rain started. And so they quickly moved everything for the reception into the church basement, and she always lamented the fact that there were no decorations in the church basement. And in some of the pictures you can see in this album, it just looks like kind of a cluttered church basement. And there they had their reception of cake and ice cream, and a marriage was formed. That experience is a far cry from the experiences of weddings today. The majority of weddings that I have done, probably in the past decade and maybe the past 2 decades, the majority of them do not happen in a church. They happen often in a wedding venue, a space that has no sacredness or no significance other than the fact that it's a convenient and cute place to have a ceremony. Weddings these days are often run by a wedding coordinator. The minister's told what to do and where to fit into the ceremony, but is certainly not viewed as being in charge or presiding over the ceremony. Receptions, as you know, are incredibly elaborate affairs, usually at a different venue than the wedding itself, usually involving full meals, open bars, sometimes live music, certainly dancing. They're incredible galas. And all that may be very good. Maybe that's the way it's supposed to be in this present moment. But I have to wonder if in the move toward the more elaborate, the more ornate, the more extensive celebrations, we're not missing the core of what a wedding ceremony is really all about and what a marriage is formed around. And today I want us to think for just a moment about the traditional wedding ceremony and the significance that is embodied in that ceremony in helping us make some important ideals, relational ideals, very concrete. And what I'd like us to do is I'd like us to go back to a very, very, very ancient Jewish tradition, a tradition that comes to us out of the ancient Near East, about marriage and about the nature of weddings. And this tradition is recorded for us in the very first book of the Bible, the book of Genesis, the 2nd chapter, the 24th verse, where the author makes a comment about marriage, and the author says this, and I'm going to quote from the King James Version because I think the rhyming of the verse is helpful in that translation. The verse says, "For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and cleave unto his wife, and the two will become one. For this cause, a man will leave his father and mother and cleave unto his wife, and the two will become one." This very ancient Near Eastern Jewish tradition has really set the standard or the pattern for marriages, at least in the Western world, for the past 2 millennia. Leaving, cleaving, becoming one. Marriage involves a radical reordering of our relational world. And that radical reordering of our relational world requires a concrete means to make the ideal real. It requires a concrete means to make the ideal real. Think with me for just a few minutes about how a traditional wedding ceremony does that. Marriage involves leaving. It involves making a formal declaration to yourself and to the world that your relational priorities are being reordered. Everything that has been of first importance to you up until this moment of time is now taking second place to the priority your spouse will now occupy in your life. From the point of this choice onward, you are saying nothing will ever come before your relationship with this other person. You're radically reorienting your priorities by choosing to leave other things behind that heretofore were of first importance of your life in order that your spouse might become your number one priority. Well, how do you do that? How do you make that declaration? You need a tradition. So the traditional wedding ceremony begins with what people often think is sort of a confusing placement of these words. They often associate it with the vows that come later in the ceremony. But the ceremony in a Christian wedding, it begins with something called the Declaration of Intention. And after the wedding party has gathered at the front of the church, and the minister welcomes the congregation, says a prayer inviting the presence and blessing of God on what will happen, the minister then says this: Steve, will you have Jane to be your wife? And will you love her faithfully as long as you both shall live? If so, say, I will. And Jane, will you have Steve to be your husband? And will you love him faithfully as long as you both shall live? If so, say, I will. The ceremony begins with this declaration that we are here to radically reorient our relational priorities. And from this point on, they'll be different. Think about how the ceremony continues. The giving of the bride, which often seems outdated and confusing in our present culture, and I understand that. But there is deep and rich symbolism behind it. The father of the bride stands before the congregation as a representative of all four parents, the parents of the groom as well as the parents of the bride. And he now gives her away. He affirms that there is now this radical reorienting of relational priority. And while to this point in time, theoretically, the groom and the bride's primary relationship has been to their family of origin, now the father of the bride, on behalf of all four parents, says, we recognize this is now changing. There is a leaving going on here. You will no longer be first loyal to us. You will be first loyal to your spouse. And this rich symbolism of tradition says that from this point in time, nothing can ever come before this first relationship of spouse to spouse. And here's what I'll tell you. Over 3+ decades of dealing with people who are struggling in their marriage, so often, the problem goes back to the fact that one or both of the spouses has never left. They've never reordered their relational priorities. The traditional wedding ceremony, it begins with this affirmation and this reality. Think about what happens next in a ceremony. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and cleave unto his wife. I love that language. The means of cleaving is love. Love properly understood, that we all understand. That at the core, love is not about a feeling, it's about a choice. Love is a decision we make regardless of how we feel. And yes, there are all kinds of wonderful emotions sometimes attached to love. But any mature person knows that love, whether it's a love for a friend, love for a child, love for a family member, love for a spouse, any mature person knows that love is not based on how we feel. Love is based on how we choose to act in any given moment when we feel like it and when we don't. Think about how this is embodied in the traditional wedding ceremony. Vows are exchanged. Jane, I give myself to you to be your husband. I promise to love and sustain you in the covenant of marriage from this day forward, in sickness and in health, in plenty and in want, in joy and in sorrow, as long as we both shall live. And the whole gamut of human experience, plenty, want, sickness, health, joy, sorrow, for all of life, I promise to love and sustain you. It's one thing to say, I love you. It's another thing to stand before God and the congregation of His people in the place that you worship Him each week and declare your commitment to choose to love this person through all the reality of life's experience. And then we exchange rings. Talk about a tradition that embodies the ideal. Here now I've taken these ideals of committing to love you, and I'm going to give you a tangible symbol of my commitment that you can wear constantly on your being as a reminder that there is at least one person in all this world who has chosen to love you no matter what. Oh my, this is incredible what the traditional marriage ceremony embodies. And then this ancient tradition out of the book of Genesis says the two will become one. The two will become one. This is describing a metaphysical reality, a transformation of new creation, new creational energy that's happening in the moment of a wedding ceremony up on the declaration of the vows of the couple. And think about how this is embodied in the traditional wedding ceremony. The couple often kneels as the minister lays hands on them, imparting through his or her being the blessing of God on the couple. And then a prayer of dedication is prayed, acknowledging, celebrating, and sanctifying this one new creation that has been brought forth by the reorienting of relational priorities in leaving and the commitment to love in cleaving. New creation is springing forth. I love this picture in my parents' album. In this old, unattractive country church with sort of the gaudy picture of Jesus hanging as the center point of the sanctuary. Here my parents kneel in that place before the Christ they love and serve. As the minister, the representation of Christ in this moment offers a prayer of blessing over them. The union, the oneness that is occurring is made concrete and real in this moment. And then it's affirmed and proclaimed in the pronouncement of the union when the minister says these holy words, ministering in the name of Jesus Christ and on behalf of His church, I pronounce that you are husband and wife. New creation has been brought forth. New creation is taking place. The ideal is being made concrete in the tradition of the ceremony. I know in our current day, far more attention is put on the reception, the rehearsal dinner, the things the bride and bridesmaid or grooms and groomsmen will do the morning before the wedding. Far more attention is placed on those things than is placed on the tradition of the ceremony itself. And I don't want to sound like a downer or someone who's being unduly critical of the developments of our culture, but friends, we're missing the point here. We're missing what marriages and weddings are all about. And the cultural reality of the disintegration of the family around us. It bears testimony to the fact that we're missing it. In 2 weeks, my parents will celebrate their 67th wedding anniversary. Almost 7 decades of a life together. That's pretty good for a low-budget ceremony in a little out-of-the-way country church with a reception of cake and ice cream in an undecorated basement. It's lasted for 67 years because they got the important stuff right. If you're preparing for a wedding now or in the future, please take to heart what is really important. And if you're in a marriage now, maybe never being mindful of some of these important things. You're wondering, should you stay at it? Should you keep going? Maybe this talk is a little reminder from heaven of the things that really make a marriage work. Maybe this will be an encouragement to you to stay in the game. Traditions matter. Traditions are important. And the tradition of the wedding ceremony is one that we really can't or shouldn't live without.